Khamzat Chimaev is going to be taking on Robert Whittaker in the main event of UFC Saudi Arabia on June 23rd. Dana White announcing this last night. My name is James Lynch. In today's video, we're going to talk about this fight. We're going to talk about the context of this fight for the middleweight division. And we're also going to talk about a bunch of other things this fight impacts. So we're going to get into all of it today. But first and foremost, let me just say I love this fight. I think this is the exact type of opponent that Khamzat Chimaev should be fighting. In my opinion, this is the first big test for him at 185 pounds. I know people like the Usman win, and I know there's going to be people in the comments reminding me that Dana White said the winner of Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev would get the title shot. But I'm glad Dana White didn't keep his word here, because frankly, a win over Kamaru Usman should not get you a middleweight title shot. Kamaru Usman is a welterweight. And look, it's not Chimaev's fault. I'm not blaming him at all. He's got to fight who he's given. He was supposed to fight Paulo Costa, who was a ranked middleweight. Costa's out of the fight. In steps in Kamaru Usman. But I just have a hard time seeing someone get a title shot off of a win over a guy in a weight class that's a weight class below her, right? And granted, we're talking about a former champion, but that should not earn you a title shot, in my opinion. So glad to see they go this route. We still don't know what's happening with the middleweight title defense for Dricus Du Plessis. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and I'm actually going to do a separate video on that as well. But yeah, I like this fight, and I think it's interesting, right? Because Chimaev, he did look pretty good in his win over Kamaru Usman, especially in that first round. Almost finished him, and ended up going to a decision in that fight. And then you've got obviously Robert Whittaker coming off a nice bounce back win over Paulo Costa in a fight that he nearly got finished in the first round. So the question is, can Khamzat Chimaev finish Robert Whittaker in this fight? I suppose it's possible, but I'm a stats guy, and if you look at Robert Whittaker's middleweight career, out of 16 fights, he's only been finished twice. So I think that's where things are going to get really interesting. The other interesting part of this fight is that it's 5 rounds. It's a main event. Chimaev has been scheduled for a 5-round fight one time, and it was against Kevin Holland, and he didn't even need to go to the second round because he finished Holland very quickly in this fight. So the one knock on Chimaev, if you want to give him one, is that in certain fights, like Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, he has slowed down a little bit. And I know I think it was the Usman fight, he had an injury. I think Burns, he didn't have an injury. I know he had a tough weight cut for that fight. That was at 170 pounds. But that's the question. Can Chimaev go 5 rounds? We know Robert Whittaker can, but can Chimaev? So that's where things get really interesting here as the fight goes on. If it even does get that long, we'll have to see how that fight looks as it goes a little bit later here. So a couple other things about this fight that I wanted to point out. This obviously rules out Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier fighting on this card. There was some talk of that with obviously the Middle Eastern crowd wanting to see Muslim fighters compete. With Chimaev in the main event, they're getting that. I didn't realistically think that Islam was going to fight on a fight night card anyways. I think that fight, if they are going to do Islam fighting anyone, particularly Dustin Poirier, that should be on International Fight Week. They're going to need to beef up that card. I think that makes a lot more sense. Like I mentioned, glad Chimaev didn't get the title shot. I think that's completely fair. And Whittaker's kind of in this weird spot as well, too, because he has a stoppage loss to the current middleweight champion, and then he also lost to Israel Adesanya in a very close fight. Trust me, I know it could have gone either way, but that was another key loss for Whittaker. So he's kind of at this point where he's got to fight sort of the risers in the division, and Chimaev certainly fits that bill with him being relatively new to the weight class as well. And the other thing that I think is pretty obvious here, and I did another video on this, is the fact that Chimaev, it doesn't appear like he can compete in the United States. I did a whole video on this. Kareem Zidane done some great reporting on this, that it seems like Chimaev is not able to enter the US. So this sort of leads to that a little bit more, although saying that having Chimaev in the Middle East is better for business as well. So that's great. Let's talk about the odds on this fight. I think this is really interesting. Chimaev, the favorite, almost 2-1 over Robert Whittaker. Now, on the one hand, I do understand it because Chimaev's younger. He's undefeated. He has won all of his fights in the UFC. And we're talking about a Robert Whittaker who almost got finished in his last fight. But that's the key word there, almost. Paulo Costa was not able to finish Robert Whittaker. I would argue that Paulo Costa has more power at 185 than Khamzat Chimaev does. I don't see a path to victory there for Chimaev as far as the knockout goes. And Whittaker's fought guys that have knockout power, including Jared Cannonier, Darren Till. These are guys that can put you out, and Whittaker's been able to withstand that. The only time that Whittaker has been knocked out at 185 anyways was Dricus Du Plessis, who also has some knockout power, and Israel Adesanya as well, who's a great striker. That's 16 fights, 2 stoppage losses at 185 pounds. Those odds sort of favor Whittaker not getting finished in a spot like this. So again, if the fight goes a little bit later, who would you favor? I would favor Robert Whittaker. So I think the fact that you're getting Robert Whittaker at almost almost 2-1 odds, 2-1 underdog, I should say, is actually pretty good value. Honestly, my pick right now in this fight is Whittaker. I think he can survive the early onslaught of Khamzat Chimaev. Now, the only other thing I'll mention is that Whitaker hasn't really fought a really good wrestler-grappler over his last couple fights, so we'll see if Chimaev's able to get the takedown. And we're also talking about Whitaker, who, way back in the day did used to fight at welterweight. He is one of the smaller middleweights in the weight class, but then you could say the same thing about Chimaev in the sense that he's made 170 as well. So that's where things is going to get interesting. Right now, my early pick on this fight is going to be Robert Whitaker winning a decision, but again, I'm not oblivious to the fact that Chimaev does look very strong in those early rounds, and we'll sort of see what happens there. So, yeah, I'm going to go Robert Whitaker, and I will be doing an early look preview on this fight as well at some point, but just wanted to point that out. Now, one other thing that I will mention, and again, I'll go into more detail in a different video about this, we're not getting Sean Strickland and Robert Whitaker. That seemed like a potential option. We don't know what's going on with, like I said, Duplessis and him defending his middleweight title. It looks like it's going to be Adesanya, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. Where does Jared Cannonier fit into all this, this situation here? So I'm curious to see where the winner of this fight goes. You would think title shot, but there's also a few interesting contenders that are sort of out there as well. So yeah, that's something to sort of keep in mind as far as Khamzat Chimaev goes and everything that is happening with this matchup. Let's talk about some of the other fights on the card just while we're here on this video. The other one they announced was Sergey Pavlovich and Alexander Volkov, which is a bit interesting because I think a lot of people expected it to be Sergey Pavlovich and Cyril Gane. What's going on with Cyril Gane? And maybe they might be saving him for Paris. Aaron did point out let me just find his tweet here. He did have the events for the rest of the year. You can see here Vegas, Rio, Newark, Vegas, Perth, Sphere. I think they're going to Paris as well this year, so that could be an option too as far as Gane fighting on the Paris card. But who's he going to fight? That's the big question. So now I wonder, are they going to do Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gane? It seemed like, I think it was very convenient that they have not announced Gane's next opponent as they sort of look ahead for Aspinall. I do believe Aspinall will fight again, even before John Jones and Stipe Miocic. And then Curtis Blades is coming off a big win, so what do you do with him? So I'm really interested in that fight. As far as a pick in Pavlovich and Volkov, I like Pavlovich by knockout. I think he's one of the most devastating strikers in the weight class, and Volkov is relatively tough to finish. But I think Pavlovich will have the edge there. Also, he's also a little bit younger here at 32 compared to 35. The other fight that was mentioned in Aaron's tweet as well is this Daniel Rodriguez and Calvin Gastelum fight. A fun, like, little veteran fight. I understand it. Don't really know why this is taking place in the Middle East, if I'm being honest. But hey, fun fight. Two guys trying to revive their careers. I think it makes sense. The other one is Shara Bullet taking on Eor Portela, which I'm glad with this too. A lot of people wanted to see Shara against Marvin Vettori. Like, listen, if you've got one win in the UFC, you shouldn't just automatically get to fight someone in the rankings. Build them up slowly. I think with Shara, he won his debut, not overly impressive. I'm glad they're sort of slowly building him up a little bit. I think that's the right call. And then Johnny Walker and Volkan Ozdemir, kind of like Gastelum and Rodriguez, a pair of veterans in the light heavyweight division looking to fight and stay relevant again, both coming off some key losses. Ozdemir, I believe, I think Ozdemir won his last fight, did he not? Yeah, he did. He beat Bogin, but lost to Krylov, a key fight prior to that, and then also lost to Ankalaev. So good test for both guys. Fresh matchup with Walker and Ozdemir, and that very, very happy about that. And then just the other fight that was already on there was this Nasrat Haqparast and Jared Gordon fight. Really good fight in the lightweight division there. So pretty good fight night card so far. Again, this will be taking place June 23rd. We'll see what type of camp they had. I'm going to try and get an interview with Robert Whitaker like I did before his last fight. But yeah, like I said right now, early pick for me is going to be Robert Whitaker. And again, pretty similar in age. Like, I think people forget Chimaev's 30 now. Like, there's not a huge age gap there. As far as miles go, Whitaker's got a lot more miles on him than Chimaev does. But even then, I know people say that, Chimaev's going to be bigger. He's got, a 2-inch height advantage, a little bit of a reach advantage. So I'm interested to see, can Chimaev take Whitaker down, and how will Whitaker look on the ground if the fight goes there? So very, very interested in that fight, and curious to see how this one unfolds. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Couple things. Who's your pick in this fight? Who do you think wins, Chimaev or Whitaker? How do you think the fight will play out? What do you think of the rest of the card? What do you think's happening with Islam and Dustin now? What do you think's happening with Sean Strickland and Jared Cannonier and the rest of the middleweight division? Let me know in the comments. Would love to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.